So we're going to try and make 3 different plastics or different materials using starch packing peanuts, citric acid, sodium bicarbonate and glycerin, also known as glycerol. Now to make the packing peanuts, we first had to start off with about 2 grams of packing peanuts. With the size packing peanuts I have, this equates to about 8 of them. So I put my 8 packing peanuts into a jar, and I'll add just enough water that if I stir it, it'll form an even and smooth paste. This is about 10 millilitres of water. Now the next step is to add either 2 mils of glycerol if you're using glycerol to make your first plastic. You can add sodium bicarbonate, soda and citric acid together to make sodium citrate, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Or you can add just 2 grams, which is about a teaspoon's worth of citric acid. Note that if you're using glycerol, which is what I'm going to show you now, we also need to add either a pinch of citric acid or about a teaspoon's worth of white vinegar. The acid there will really help the glycerol to bind to the starch. Now I have a measuring cylinder and I'm going to be measuring out 2 millilitres of glycerol. If you don't have a measuring cylinder at home, feel free to use a teaspoon, because about a teaspoon's worth is a couple of mil. We just add our glycerol to our starch, we stir that in, and then a pinch of citric acid. If you're in a lab, you can also use about 3 drops worth of dilute hydrochloric acid, and that will even work even better. So a pinch of citric acid. Make sure you're wearing gloves if you're using this at home, especially if you have sensitive skin. And we keep stirring all of this together so we have a smooth paste. Now if you're going to make the sodium citrate plastic, you need to weigh out about 2 grams of sodium bicarbonate, or the end of a teaspoon's worth. And you need to add that to a cup. Now I'm going to add mine into a boiling tube, but you can add it to a small cup. About a teaspoon's worth of citric acid, just roughly 2 grams again, to our sodium bicarbonate is enough to cause a reaction. And we can cover that in about 2 to 3 millilitres of water. Notice what happens instantly when I add the water. A vigorous reaction starts, which is a neutralisation reaction. It will also get cold, as energy is drawn in from the environment around it to power the chemical reaction. Now when this reaction is finished, it will have stopped fizzing, and I can then add this to my starch paste solution, and I'll stir that, and then I can begin the heating process. Our next step then is to heat our smooth paste on a hot plate. I'm going to show you a close-up of this process, and I'm going to speed it up because it might take some time. You want to reduce the water content, and you want starch to start to expand and go clear. Once you've got a clear sticky paste, you can then move forwards. Once you've got your thin paste, which will be a little bit sticky right now, you can go ahead and put it onto a piece of foil or greaseproof paper and put it in the oven on a low heat to dry out. Remember, we don't want the water in it to boil because we'll get lots of air bubbles in our plastic. I'm going to pour mine into an evaporating dish and leave it in an oven. I'm going to keep checking it every 15 minutes or so just to make sure that I don't burn it. So let's have a look at the results from using the 3 different plasticizers with our starch packing peanuts. Firstly, our citric acid plasticizer has made this rubbery, flexible plastic, which might even be a little bit sticky to touch. Then with my glycerol, I got this thin membrane, which looks like it would make a great plastic bag which would dissolve in the rain. The sodium citrate and packing peanuts has given me this hard crystalline structure which I can't actually get out of the bottom of my ceramic basin without having to break it. This is very, very hard and looks to be quite brittle. I'm going to show you some which didn't go well for me and I'll explain where I think I went wrong. When using the sodium citrate, I think I had a lot of unreacted sodium bicarbonate in it, and when I heated it up, I heated it on a high temperature, and the sodium bicarbonate caused the starch solution to rise, and it's formed this very, very, very hard, quite large lump. Very interesting still. With the citric acid, it seemed to cook much quicker than the others, and I left it for about 20 minutes at too high a temperature as well, and it burnt, and I got these hard, black little shards of my citric acid and starch. And then for my glycerol, one occasion I added too much glycerol and overheated it slightly, and what I ended up with this rubbery, snot-like black slime, which does return to its original shape when I pull on it and play with it. So these are the 3 different ways where I think I went wrong with each one of these. If you want to extend this activity, try using a cupcake holder or baking tray, put some foil lined in it, and then add different amounts of glycerol or different amounts of the different plasticizers to the pastes and put them in different slots along your cupcake tray. You might want to do 1 milliliter of glycerol, half a milliliter of glycerol, 2 ml, or even 3 mils of glycerol as you go along the tray, and see what different materials you make. What did you get? Feel free to send us in pictures of the different plastics that you've made.